The shuttle landed on the dark surface of Prime with a heavy thud that Kyle felt in his bones. He grabbed his bag and stepped out into the artificial light of the landing platform. The air tasted different here, filtered and clean in a way that reminded him of hospitals back on Earth. Around him, creatures of every shape and size moved with purpose toward the massive building that rose from the frozen ground like a monument to alien engineering. Kyle was 26 years old. He had grown up in a small town in Montana where winters could kill a man who did not know how to survive them. His father had been a carpenter. His grandfather had been a farmer. Both of them had taught him that a man who could not build with his hands was a man who would not last long when things went wrong. He had joined the army at 19 and spent 4 years learning how to stay alive in places that wanted him dead. When the aliens made first contact with Earth 7 years ago, Kyle had been building a cabin in the woods with nothing but hand tools and determination. Now he was the first human to attend the Institute of Planetary Sciences. The selection committee had chosen him not for his academic achievements, but for his practical skills. Humanity needed representatives who could show the galaxy that Earth was more than just a primitive backwater planet. Kyle was not sure he was the right choice for that job, but he had never been one to turn down a challenge. A tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms approached him as he walked toward the main entrance. The creature wore a uniform that marked it as Institute staff and carried a device that glowed with soft light. "You are the human," the creature said. Its voice came from a translator embedded in its chest. "I am administrator. I will show you to your quarters." Kyle followed. The hallways of the Institute were wide enough to accommodate beings of many different sizes. Some of the students he passed were smaller than cats. Others were larger than elephants. All of them stopped to stare at the strange, soft-skinned creature walking among them. His quarters were a small room with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out over the frozen landscape of the moon. The room had been modified to support human biology. The air mixture was correct. The temperature was comfortable. The lighting matched the spectrum of Earth's sun. Someone had gone to considerable trouble to make sure he would not die in his sleep. "Your first class begins tomorrow," said. "Advanced Wilderness Survival with Professor. The professor has expressed interest in observing human capabilities." "I bet he has," Kyle said. Made a sound that might have been confusion or might have been amusement. "You will find that many here are curious about your species. Humanity has advanced very quickly since first contact. Some find this impressive, others find it concerning." "What do you find it?" The administrator's 4 arms shifted in a gesture Kyle could not interpret. "I find it interesting. Your species has existed for only a fraction of the time that most galactic civilizations have existed, yet you have already begun to spread beyond your home world. You build things, you adapt, you survive. These are qualities that the older species have sometimes forgotten how to value." Kyle unpacked his bag after left. He had brought very little with him, some clothes, some personal items, a photograph of his family standing in front of the cabin he had built with his father the summer before the old man died. He placed the photograph on the desk where he could see it and reminded himself why he was here, not just to represent humanity, but to prove that the skills his father and grandfather had taught him still mattered, in a galaxy full of advanced technology and ancient civilizations. The next morning he woke early and made his way to the classroom where advanced wilderness survival was held. The room was arranged in a semicircle with specialized pods for students who required different atmospheric conditions. Kyle found the pod marked for Earth Standard Environment and settled into the seat inside. Professor was his species had been one of the founding members of the Galactic Council over 50,000 years ago. He stood nearly 3 meters tall with skin like cooled lava and 4 arms that moved with surprising grace for a being of his size. His 4 eyes swept across the classroom as students filed in and found their places. "I am Professor," he said when everyone had settled. "This course will teach you to survive in environments that wish to kill you. You will learn to build shelter. You will learn to find water and food. You will learn to navigate terrain that offers no mercy to the unprepared. Many of you come from comfortable worlds where survival is guaranteed by technology. That comfort has made you weak. I intend to make you strong." Kyle listened carefully as the professor outlined the curriculum. Most of what described was familiar territory. The principles of survival were universal whether you were stranded in the Montana wilderness or on an alien moon. Find shelter, find water, find food, keep moving, never give up. "Our first practical examination will take place in 3 days, continued. You will be transporting to the dark side of. The temperature there is negative 180 degrees by human measurement. The wind carries particles sharp enough to damage exposed tissue. You will have 1 standard hour to construct a shelter capable of sustaining your biology for 12 hours. This is considered a basic competency test." Several students made sounds of distress. Kyle saw a gelatinous creature in one of the pods ripple with what looked like anxiety. A bird-like being near the back of the room flattened its feathers against its skull. Kyle felt something different. He felt excited. 1 hour to build a shelter in extreme conditions. Back home that would have been called a Tuesday. His father had once made him build a snow shelter during a blizzard with nothing but a shovel and his bare hands. His grandfather had survived 3 days in a collapsed mine shaft by shoring up the walls with wooden beams and his own belt. The family had been building things to stay alive for generations. Professor's 4 eyes found Kyle across the room. "I see the human is not concerned," the professor said. "Perhaps your species does not understand the severity of the conditions you will face." "I understand fine," Kyle said. "I was just thinking that 1 hour seems like a long time." The classroom fell silent. Every eye and sensor and optical organ in the room turned toward the small pink creature who had just challenged the most respected survival instructor in the galaxy. Made a sound that rumbled through the floor. "We shall see, human, we shall see." The transport shuttle dropped 14 students onto the frozen surface of dark side. Kyle felt the cold immediately despite his environmental suit, the heating systems against his skin as they fought to keep his body temperature stable. Through his helmet visor he could see the landscape stretching out in every direction. Frozen nitrogen formed the ground beneath his feet, crystalline rock formations up from the ice like the bones of some long-dead giant. The sky was black and filled with stars that did not twinkle because there was almost no atmosphere to disturb their light. Professor's voice crackled through the communication system built into every student's suit. "Your 1 hour begins now. Construct a shelter that can sustain your biology for a minimum of 12 hours. I will observe from the station above. Begin." The other students scattered across the landscape. Kyle watched them for a moment. A young named pulled out a scanning device and began taking readings of the ground composition. A student named started laying out the contents of her survival kit in neat, organized rows. The gelatinous student, whose name translated roughly as membrane of shifting light, oozed toward a depression in the ice that might offer some natural protection. Kyle did not waste time on analysis. He had spent the past 3 days studying the environment and planning his approach. The survival kit on his back contained basic tools and a heating element and flexible polymer sheeting. The crystalline rock formations around him contained everything else he needed. He moved toward the nearest formation and examined it quickly. The crystals grew in overlapping sheets that created natural angles and surfaces. Some of them were thick enough to provide structural support. Others were thin enough to cut with the plasma tool in his kit. He selected a formation that offered natural windbreak on 2 sides and began to work. His hands moved with the confidence of long practice. Cut here, stack there, wedge this piece into that gap. The principles were the same whether he was building a snow cave in Montana or a crystal shelter on an alien moon. Use what the environment gives you, work with the terrain instead of against it. Do not overthink the problem, just build. The polymer sheeting went over the gaps between crystal slabs. The quick-setting adhesive from his kit bonded the materials together in seconds. He carved channels in the ice to direct any potential melt away from his shelter, even though he knew the temperature would never rise high enough for melting to be a concern. Old habits died hard, and attention to detail was what separated survivors from victims. The heating element got positioned in the center of the enclosed space. He angled it to maximize radiant warmth while minimizing energy consumption. A small vent near the top of the structure would prevent carbon dioxide buildup during extended occupation. The entrance was a simple flap of polymer that could be opened and closed as needed. Kyle stepped back and checked his suit's chronometer. 9 minutes and 43 seconds had passed since the professor gave the signal to begin. He activated his communicator. "Professor, this is Kyle. My shelter is complete and ready for inspection." Silence answered him, then static. Then the professor's voice stripped of its usual authority. "Repeat that statement." "My shelter is complete, ready for inspection." More silence. Kyle could hear what sounded like rapid conversation in the background, languages his translator could not process, tones that suggested confusion and disbelief. "Remain at your position. I am coming to you directly." Kyle sat down on a bench he had carved into one of the crystal formations during construction. Around him, the other students continued their work, had begun assembling a frame from prefabricated components, was still organizing her materials with increasingly frantic movements. Membrane of shifting light appeared to be struggling with the basic concept of rigid construction. A shuttle appeared over the horizon within minutes. It descended toward Kyle's position and settled onto the frozen ground with a hiss of displaced gases. Professor emerged before the engines had fully powered down. His 4 arms reached toward the shelter as if he needed to touch it to confirm its existence. Kyle stood and stepped aside. The professor spent a long time examining the construction. He pressed against the walls to test their stability. He checked the seal on the polymer membrane. He measured the interior temperature with a device from his belt. He peered at the ventilation system with an expression that Kyle interpreted as confusion. "You built this structure in under 10 minutes, said finally. "Yes, sir. Using only the materials provided in your standard kit and resources available in the local environment." "Yes, sir." The professor's 4 eyes blinked in a pattern that Kyle had learned indicated deep thought. "Explain to me how this is possible. My calculations suggested that even the most efficient student would require at least 45 minutes to complete this exercise. You have completed it in less than a quarter of that time." Kyle considered his response carefully. He did not want to sound arrogant or dismissive, but he also did not want to undersell the capabilities that his species had developed over millions of years of survival. "Professor," he said, "on Earth we have been building shelters to survive hostile conditions for longer than recorded history. Every human alive today is descended from ancestors who figured out how to stay alive when the environment tried to kill them. Ice ages, deserts, floods, predators, disease, we survived all of it by building things." Was quiet for a moment. "I am aware of your planet's environmental challenges. I did not fully appreciate their implications. Most species do not. They see our short lifespans and our fragile bodies and assume we are weak. But weakness is what made us strong. We could not outrun predators, so we built traps. We could not survive cold, so we built shelters and made fire. We could not fight with claws and fangs, so we built weapons. Everything about human civilization comes from our need to overcome our own limitations." The professor turned to look at the other students. Most of them had made only partial progress. Some had not even begun construction yet. The students' attempt at a shelter had already collapsed into a shapeless pile of materials. "The hour is not yet complete," said. "I will announce your results when the exercise concludes. For now, please remain here." "Of course, Professor." But Kyle saw the way looked at him as the professor returned to his shuttle. It was the look of someone whose understanding of the universe had just been fundamentally altered. Kyle had seen that look before, on the faces of drill instructors who realized that the quiet farm kid from Montana was tougher than anyone expected. On the faces of officers who discovered that practical experience sometimes mattered more than formal training. He sat back down on his crystal bench and waited for the hour to end. Around him, the alien landscape glittered with frozen beauty. Above him, the stars burned with ancient light. And somewhere in the distance, the other students struggled to accomplish in 60 minutes what Kyle had accomplished in less than 10. His father would have been proud. The results of the practical examination spread through the institute than Kyle had anticipated. By the time he returned to his quarters that evening, his communication device was already filled with messages. Students he had never met wanted to know how he had done it. Faculty members requested meetings to discuss his techniques. A representative from the Galactic Council's Academic Affairs Division asked him to verify the details of his performance. Kyle ignored most of the messages and went to sleep. He had learned long ago that attention was a distraction. What mattered was the work itself. Everything else was just noise. The next morning, Professor asked him to stay after class. When the other students had filed out, closed the door and stood in silence for several moments. His 4 arms were folded behind his back in a posture that Kyle had come to recognize as contemplation. "I have been teaching survival techniques at this institute for 47 standard cycles," said finally. "In that time, I have instructed more than 3,000 students from nearly 100 different species. Not one of them has ever completed the shelter exercise in under 30 minutes. The previous record was held by an engineer who completed the task in 32 minutes. He went on to become one of the most respected survival specialists in the known galaxy." Kyle waited. "Your performance has generated significant discussion among the faculty," the professor continued. "Several of my colleagues believe you must have somehow cheated. They suggest that humans possess secret technology that was not disclosed in your enrollment documentation. Others theorize that you received advanced knowledge of the exercise and prepared specifically for it." "I did not cheat, Professor. I used the same kit everyone else had. You inspected my shelter yourself." "I know." 4 arms shifted uncomfortably. "That is precisely what troubles them. Your species has been part of galactic civilization for less than a decade. According to every metric we use to measure developmental progress, humanity should be centuries away from producing individuals capable of outperforming students from species with tens of thousands of years of engineering experience." Kyle shrugged. "Those metrics might be measuring the wrong things." "Explain." "The galactic community seems to judge species based on their technology level. You look at how advanced our starships are or how sophisticated our computers are, and you draw conclusions about our overall capabilities. but that ignores something important about humans. Which is, Kyle leaned forward in his seat. We have been building things to survive for over 2 million years, not with computers or advanced materials, with rocks and sticks and mud and bone, with our bare hands when nothing else was available. Every single human being alive today carries the accumulated knowledge of countless generations who figured out how to stay alive in conditions that should have killed them. Moved to his desk and activated a display screen. Images began appearing on the surface, structures that Kyle recognized from Earth's history, igloos built from blocks of snow, adobe houses baked by desert sun, longhouses constructed from wooden poles and animal hides, underground dwellings carved into hillsides, stilt houses rising above flood waters, stone fortresses perched on mountain peaks. I have been researching your species since the examination, admitted. The architectural diversity of human civilization is remarkable. You have constructed permanent and temporary shelters in every climate zone your planet offers: Arctic tundra, tropical rainforest, arid desert, temperate forest, volcanic islands. Every environment has produced unique solutions adapted to local conditions. And those are just the ones that lasted long enough to be recorded, Kyle said. For every structure in your database, there are probably thousands that existed and disappeared without leaving any trace. Temporary camps, emergency shelters, hunting blinds, fishing platforms. Our ancestors were building things to stay alive long before they learned to write any of it down. The professor turned off the display. I must confess something to you, Kyle. What is that, Professor? When I learned that a human would be attending my course, I expected to spend the semester helping you catch up to your peers. Your species has a reputation in academic circles. You are considered aggressive and impulsive. One delegate to the Galactic Council described humanity as a species that would burn down an entire forest to cook a single meal. Kyle almost laughed. That is not entirely unfair. No, but I am beginning to suspect that it misses the larger truth. His four eyes focused on Kyle with an intensity that felt almost physical. You would burn down a forest if necessary, but you would also know how to survive without the forest afterward, how to find other food sources, how to build shelter from the ashes, how to keep going when everything around you has been destroyed. We do not give up easily, Kyle agreed. It is not always a good thing. Sometimes it would be smarter to quit, but giving up is not in our nature. I have underestimated your species, said. I suspect many others have made the same mistake. The galactic community looks at your primitive technology and your short individual lifespans and concludes that you are a young species still learning to walk. But you are not young at all. You are ancient. Your technology is new, but your survival instincts have been refined over millions of years of brutal selection pressure. Kyle did not know how to respond to that. It was strange to hear his own thoughts reflected back at him by an alien professor on a moon millions of light years from Earth. I would like to propose something, continued. I would like you to assist me in developing a new curriculum, one that incorporates human survival techniques and perspectives. I believe your species has much to teach the rest of the galaxy about practical resilience. I would be Professor. Good. His forearms unfolded and spread in a gesture that Kyle interpreted as satisfaction. We will begin immediately. There is much work to be done, and I suspect we have only scratched the surface of what humanity is capable of. Kyle left the professor's office feeling something he had not expected. Not pride exactly, more like validation. All those years of learning from his father and grandfather, all those skills that modern society on Earth considered obsolete. Here in the wider galaxy they were not obsolete at all. They were exactly what the situation required. He thought of his father standing in the half-finished cabin teaching him how to notch logs so they would fit together without nails. He thought of his grandfather explaining how to read the weather by watching the of birds. Simple knowledge, practical knowledge, the kind of knowledge that kept people alive when everything else failed. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity was more than just an aggressive young species with primitive technology. They were survivors, they were builders, and they were just getting started. Word of Kyle's performance continued to spread in the weeks that followed. Students from other courses began approaching him in the hallways. Faculty members he had never met to him with expressions of respect or curiosity. A journalist from an interstellar news network requested an interview that Kyle politely declined. He was not interested in becoming famous. He was interested in learning and in proving that humanity deserved its place among the stars. The young who had finished second in the shelter exercise sought Kyle out after a lecture on environmental adaptation. Scales were the pale that indicated youth among his species, but his four eyes held an intelligence that Kyle recognized immediately. This was someone who paid attention, someone who wanted to understand rather than simply accept. I have been studying your technique, said without introduction. I analyzed the recording of your shelter construction. I measured your movements and timed your decisions. I still cannot fully comprehend how you accomplished what you accomplished. What part confuses you? All of it. Scales shifted slightly, indicating frustration. My species has been building structures for over 50,000 years. We have developed sophisticated engineering principles and construction methodologies, yet you outperformed me by a factor of 5 using only basic tools and raw materials. Kyle thought about how to explain. When you started the exercise, what was the first thing you did? I scanned the environment to assess available resources and optimal construction locations. How long did that take? Approximately 4 minutes. And what did you do during those 4 minutes? Paused. I gathered data, I analyzed options, I developed a construction plan based on the information I collected. Right, and while you were doing all of that, what was I doing? You were already building. Kyle, that is the difference. You were thinking about building, I was building while I was thinking. Humans do not separate analysis from action the way your species does. We do both at the same time. It is messy and inefficient in some ways, but it means we start producing results immediately. But how do you know your approach will work if you have not fully analyzed the situation first? We do not know for certain. We make our best guess based on experience and instinct, and we adjust as we go. If something does not work, we try something else. We keep moving forward even when we are not sure we are going in the right direction. Considered this for a long moment. That seems like a dangerous way to approach complex problems. It is. Humans make a lot of mistakes, but we also accomplish things very quickly when speed matters more than perfection. In survival situations, speed almost always matters more than perfection. The conversation marked the beginning of an unexpected friendship. Began joining Kyle for meals in the institute cafeteria. They discussed engineering principles and survival strategies and the differences between their species. Kyle learned that approached problems with careful methodical analysis because their long lifespans gave them the luxury of patience. Learned that humans approached problems with aggressive speed because their short lifespans made every moment precious. Other students began gravitating toward their discussions. The WHO's organized approach to the shelter exercise had ultimately failed her became a regular participant. She brought a perspective shaped by her species' hive-based society, where cooperation and coordination were valued above individual initiative. Membrane of shifting light, the WHO had failed the exercise entirely offered insights from a species that had evolved on a world without solid surfaces. The concept of rigid construction was completely alien to thinking, but Membrane was eager to understand it. A bird-like student named joined the group after hearing about their discussions from other students. Her crest of brilliant blue feathers indicated high social status among her people. She had been watching Kyle since the shelter exercise, and she was not shy about explaining why. Your species fascinates me, said during one of their conversations. My people have been space for over 12,000 years. In all that time, we have never developed a professional military tradition. Conflicts among are resolved through negotiation or economic pressure. The idea of organized violence as a tool of statecraft is considered primitive and barbaric. Many humans would agree with that assessment, Kyle said. And yet your species has perfected the art of organized violence. Your military traditions are studied by security analysts throughout the galaxy. Your soldiers are considered among the most dangerous individual combatants known to exist. His head tilted in the way her species used to express deep consideration. How do you reconcile this with your capacity for cooperation and creativity? How can the same species produce both warriors and artists, destroyers and builders? Kyle thought about his own experience, the years of military training, the deployments to dangerous places, the violence he had witnessed and participated in, and then the quiet satisfaction of building a cabin with his father, the peaceful hours spent learning carpentry and farming and all the other skills that had nothing to do with fighting. Humans are not one thing, he said finally. We contain contradictions. We can be violent and peaceful, destructive and creative, selfish and generous. What we are in any given moment depends on what the situation requires. When survival demands violence, we become violent. When survival demands cooperation, we become cooperative. We adapt to whatever circumstances we face. That adaptability is what makes you dangerous, observed. Other species are more predictable. We can be analyzed and understood and anticipated. Humans cannot be predicted because you yourselves do not know what you will do until you do it. Is that a compliment or a criticism? I am not certain, perhaps both. The group continued to meet regularly as the semester progressed. They shared knowledge and perspectives from their different species. They debated survival strategies and construction techniques and the nature of intelligence itself. Carl found himself learning as much from his alien companions as they learned from him. The galaxy was far more complex and diverse than he had imagined, and every conversation revealed new depths of understanding. Professor began incorporating their discussions into his lectures. He invited Kyle to present demonstrations of human construction techniques to the entire class. He referenced human survival stories as case studies in determination and adaptability. The tale of Ernest and his stranded expedition became a particular among the students who struggled to comprehend how any species could survive such an ordeal through sheer willpower. Kyle felt something changing in the way the other students looked at him. The curiosity remained, but it was joined now by respect. They no longer saw him as a representative of a primitive young species. They saw him as a colleague, an equal, someone whose perspective was valuable precisely because it was different from their own. Humanity had earned its place at the table, and Kyle from a small town in Montana was the one who had proven it. The semester ended with a comprehensive examination that tested everything the students had learned. Unlike the practical shelter exercise, this was a written assessment designed to evaluate theoretical understanding of survival principles across multiple environmental types. Kyle scored adequately but not exceptionally. His practical knowledge exceeded his academic preparation, and several questions about the biochemistry of extreme environment adaptation left him guessing at answers he could not fully support. But the examination results were not what mattered most about the final days of the semester. Professor called a special session on the last day before the break period began. All 14 students from the Advanced Wilderness Survival course attended. Several faculty observers were also present, including administrators whose attention suggested that something significant was about to happen. "This semester has been educational," began. A ripple of amusement passed through the room at the understatement. "When I designed this curriculum, I made assumptions about the capabilities of different species. Those assumptions have been challenged in ways I did not anticipate." The display wall behind him activated and showed footage from the shelter exercise. Kyle watched himself move through the crystalline landscape, selecting materials and assembling the structure with efficient purpose. 9 minutes and 43 seconds compressed into a few moments of playback. "I have reviewed this recording hundreds of times," continued. "I have consulted with construction experts from 7 different species. None of them can fully explain how Kyle accomplished what he accomplished in the time he accomplished it." Kyle felt uncomfortable under the attention of so many observers, but he remained silent. "Closest explanation we have developed is that humans possess what we are tentatively calling integrated survival cognition. Your species does not separate practical knowledge from theoretical understanding the way most galactic species do. When you encounter a problem, you do not analyze first and act second. You analyze and act simultaneously, drawing on a reservoir of practical experience that has been accumulated and refined over millions of years of evolutionary pressure." The display changed to show comparison charts, performance metrics for various species across different survival scenarios, the limited data points available for human performance. "Humans consistently outperform predictions in scenarios rapid adaptation to hostile conditions," said. "They underperform in scenarios that reward methodical planning and careful risk assessment. This pattern suggests that human cognition is optimized for crisis response rather than prevention." "We are good in emergencies," Kyle offered, "less good at preventing them from happening in the first place." Several of the faculty observers made notes on their recording devices. Scales shifted to that indicated intense interest. Crest rose to its full height. "This insight has implications beyond wilderness survival," continued. "If humans are optimized for crisis response, it may explain aspects of your species that have puzzled galactic observers. Your rapid technological advancement since first contact, your willingness to take risks that other species would consider suicidal, your tendency to solve problems in ways that others find alarming or incomprehensible." The professor paused and let his words settle over the room. "Before Kyle arrived at this institute, I believed I understood the hierarchy of species capabilities. I believed that older civilizations with longer histories of technological development would always outperform younger species in practical applications. This semester has proven me wrong." Turn to face Kyle directly. "Your species is not less advanced than ours. You are differently advanced. Your millions of years of survival pressure have produced capabilities that most galactic species never needed to develop. You are not learning to walk among the stars, you are running, and some of us are only now beginning to understand how fast you are moving." The room was silent for a moment, then clicked her mandibles in the gesture of agreement. Membrane of shifting light rippled with that suggested deep appreciation, let out a long melodic note that Kyle had learned was the equivalent of applause. Raised one of his 4 arms for silence. "I would like to make a recommendation to the Academic Affairs Division," he said. I believe the Institute should expand its human exchange significantly. We have much to learn from this species and they have much to teach us. The galaxy has grown comfortable over millennia of stability. We have forgotten what it means to struggle for survival. Humanity has not forgotten. They carry that knowledge in their blood and bones and in every structure they build with their bare hands. The session ended shortly afterward. Students filed out, many of them stopping to speak with Kyle or offer their congratulations or share their appreciation for his species. But it was Professor who delivered the final lesson. Kyle, the professor said, stopping him at the door, I have one more question for you. Yes, Professor. When you were building your shelter, you moved with absolute confidence. No hesitation, no uncertainty. How did you know your design would work? How could you be certain in an environment you had never experienced before? Kyle thought about the question. He thought about his father teaching him carpentry, his grandfather showing him how to read the land, all those generations of who had built and survived and passed their knowledge down to the next. I did not know it would work, Professor, not for certain, but I knew that doing something was better than doing nothing, that action was better than paralysis, that trying and failing was better than never trying at all. He paused. On Earth we have an expression, perfect is the enemy of good. It means that waiting for ideal conditions often prevents you from accomplishing anything. Sometimes you have to build your shelter with whatever materials you have in whatever time you have, and trust that your best effort will be enough. Was silent for a long moment, then slowly his forearms came together in a gesture that Kyle had never seen before. Later he would learn that it was an ancient sign of the highest respect. I believe your species may have much to teach the galaxy, the professor said quietly. Kyle smiled. We are quick learners, Professor, but we are pretty good teachers too. He walked out into the artificial daylight of the Institute, thinking about everything that had happened since his arrival. He had come here to prove that humanity deserved its place among the stars. He had done that and more. He had shown an ancient civilization that practical knowledge and survival instinct mattered as much as advanced technology and accumulated wisdom. His father would have been proud. His grandfather would have, and said something about how the more things change, the more they stay the same. And somewhere back on Earth, a new generation of humans was learning the same lessons that Kyle had learned. How to build, how to survive, how to keep going when everything seemed impossible. The galaxy had no idea what was coming, but Kyle knew. Humanity was just getting started.